Welcome to the International Childbirth Initiative webinar series on the 12 steps to safe and respectful mother-baby-family maternity care. My name is Michelle Scartharian, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Childbirth Initiative. Today's webinar is on Step 4, Acknowledge the Mother's Right to Continuous Support During Labor and Birth. The International Childbirth Initiative is a framework for implementation and quality improvement that strives to achieve the 12 steps for safe and respectful mother-baby-family maternity care through a self-evaluative and reflective process at the facility level. ICI is also a global resource network of facilities striving to share their learning and improve the provision of care. It was created through the joint effort of the International Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics and the International Mother-Baby-Childbirth Organization, and now has grown to include more than 30 partner organizations. We are open to all birthing facilities who are willing to commit to delivering safe and respectful mother-baby-family maternity care. Today's webinar is Step 4, Offer Continuous Support. I'm pleased to introduce our first presenter, Elena Carrillo, the president of DONA International. DONA International is the world's first, largest, and leading doula certifying organization. Founded in 1992, and today they've certified more than 13,000 doulas across 56 countries. Their mission is to promote high-quality birth and postpartum support by setting the standard for the doula profession through evidence-based training and certification for doulas from diverse backgrounds. Elena herself has attended 3,000 births. Our second presenter today is Dr. Christine Morton, a research sociologist and the author of Birth Ambassadors, Doulas and the Reemergence of Woman-Supported Birth in America. Dr. Morton is with the California Maternal Quality Care Collaborative at Stanford University School of Medicine since 2008, where she has published research informed by the California Pregnancy-Associated Mortality Review and contributed to translational maternal quality improvement initiatives. I'm so pleased to introduce our first speaker, Elena Carrillo.
I am honored to be presenting along with my dear friend, Dr. Christine Morton, Step 4 of the International Childbirth Initiative, Offer Continuous Support. Next. Women have traditionally been surrounded and supported by women during childbirth around the world in several cultures. Here we have just a few examples. In the islands of the South Pacific, we see a woman birthing attended by a midwife with a female companion by her side. In South America, we have an Inca sculpture from Peru representing a woman giving birth attended by her midwife and supported by another female. In our continent, in Mexico, my homeland, we have an Aztec codex that shows a woman birthing attended by a tisime, a midwife, and supported by her tisitl, a doula, and another young female. In Europe, France, a woman gives birth attended by la sage-femme, her midwife, and supported by another female. Next. Step 4 clearly states that we have to inform the mother of the benefits of continuous support during labor and birth and affirm her right to receive such support from companion or companions of her choice. This may include the father, partner, family member, doula, a birth companion trained and certified in the provision of continuous labor support, traditional birth attendant when acknowledged, recognized, and or integrated into maternal health service provision or others. Continuous support during labor improves outcomes for women and newborns, including a more positive birthing experience, an increase in spontaneous vaginal births, a shorter duration of labor, a decrease in the number of cesarean and instrumental vaginal births, less need for analgesics, and less low 5-minute APGAR scores. Such care appears to be most beneficial when given by a person who is present solely to provide support, is not a member of the woman's own network, is experienced in providing labor support, and has at least a modest amount of training, such as a doula. Next slide, please. Supportive roles. There are many persons who can provide support during childbirth. This includes physicians or midwives, nurses, companions of women's choosing, familia, father, female relatives or friend, or trained doula. Next, please. Yet, the only one that provides continuous emotional, physical, and informational support during childbirth is the doula. Comparing emotional care roles, this is a very interesting slide, and I would ask you to carefully review it, paying special attention to the care that different support people, as the ones I mentioned previously, can provide to the mother during labor and birth. As you can see, this slide has many boxes that relate to the care provided to the laboring woman by different people. If you look closely at the last box on the right side of the screen, you may see that the doula fills up almost all boxes. In fact, only one is not filled by the doula: love for mother and baby. Although doulas do love all mothers and babies, this special box is reserved and filled by the baby's father or loved one. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Christine Morton to continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Elena. It is truly an honor to present Step 4 with you. So as Elena mentioned, many persons can provide emotional support and comfort to the laboring person, but it has been clear from the research that there are benefits from continuous support in labor. And as Elena noted, this is what the doula can provide. A Cochrane review was done that summarized 27 randomized controlled trials of nearly 16,000 women. And they found that having continuous support versus none was associated with no harms and impressive benefits, as you see here. Next slide, please. This slide has more detail on the significant findings of the review, but overall, women with continuous support were more likely to have spontaneous vaginal births, shorter labors, and less likely to have negative birth experiences, labor pain medication, epidurals or spinal analgesia, instrumental vaginal births, cesarean births, and low 5-minute APGAR scores. Next slide. And importantly, the review included studies that showed results of support provided by a hospital staff member or a family friend. However, in this review, it was only support provided by the doula where the researchers saw a significantly reduced risk for cesarean and a decreased likelihood of a negative birth experience. In this review update, they defined support continuously as at a minimum during active labor, but that was often longer. And the support might include help with comfort measures, emotional support, information, communicating a woman's wishes to others. Next slide. So the very first study of continuous support was published back in 1980 by Roberto Sosa, John Kennel, Marshall Klaus, and colleagues. And when this publication emerged, it was a significant boost to the persons who had been working as doulas to see what the impact of their care was for women who were in labor. Next, please. Now, there are many ways to describe doulas. In some ways, as Elena mentioned earlier, this role has been around since the development of human social life. And yet the word doula itself comes from the Greek. It describes someone who is a handmaiden, a servant, even a slave. There can be a derogatory meaning. But in the modern context, the doula is used to describe someone who's providing professional labor support. Early on, doulas were described as mothering the mother, providing that extra support that is needed and delivered with a kind and warm manner. Been compared to technology, such that, John Kennel said, if doula care was a drug, it would be unethical not to provide it. Well, doulas are not drugs. They are people who are out there working very hard to provide this care for pregnant persons and their families. And more recently, the doulas have been seen as an essential strategy to help reduce cesarean rates and to mitigate against racism and disrespectful maternity care. Next slide. So what is doula care? It's really important to note that doulas are not clinical folks. They have no medical role at the birth. They do not do assessments, diagnoses, or treatment. However, they are uniquely trained to provide non-clinical, emotional, physical, and informational support, as we have said. The birth doulas also provide the hands-on comfort measures and share resources information about labor and birth. One of the most interesting things that I found in my research, in particular on the doula role, is how doulas can facilitate positive communication between the birthing person and their care providers. They open, if you will, a conversation wedge that can happen so easily in a medical setting where people might be intimidated by the white coats and by the professionals in the room. So doulas can help the birthing person and their care providers by helping women articulate their questions, their preferences and values around birth. Next slide, please. Now, doula training is usually a 4-day workshop, but many doulas continue learning throughout their career. But the core competencies of a doula includes understanding basic anatomy and physiology as related to childbirth. They also learn how to employ different strategies to provide emotional support. They learn a variety of hands-on skills that help with coping with labor. They learn a lot of skills to provide a wide variety of strategies to cope with labor, including the double hip squeeze, massage, and many, many more. Um, as I said before, they foster effective communication. And also importantly, doulas bring with them often an awareness of allopathic and holistic care systems. And as they are typically trained under a midwifery model of birth framework, they also learn more about that and are able to share that knowledge with their clients. And finally, one of the most dramatic impacts that doulas can have, at least in the US context, is supporting breastfeeding and lactation needs of the birthing person after they give birth. Next slide. Now, there are many doulas models of care. There is a solo or group practice model, and these typically include doulas who become very entrepreneurial. They provide their services on a contracted basis for a fee, and many doulas include other kinds of services or skills they have to provide a complete package. Those extra skills may include nutrition knowledge, yoga instruction, prenatal massage, photography. There are many ways that doulas work as entrepreneurs in this setting. Another model of care is called the community-based model. And this involves support provided by doulas who have similar experiences to the people they are serving. And this community-based model often includes a racial or social justice focus. And in 2019, there was a wonderful white paper published around this issue that I encourage you to check out. Third type of model that doulas can provide is through facility-based or peer support. These are often volunteer programs, and doula care is provided and organized through a hospital program. There's another research reference there for you to look at an example of a hospital-based doula program in Boston to support health equity. Next slide. Now, since that initial finding came out in 1980 by Drs. Kennel, Klaus, and colleagues, there have been, many of doula care I noted were referenced in the Cochrane review earlier. And more recently, as the US continues to face rising cesarean rates, and obstetricians are now increasingly concerned about that, a white paper produced by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine that to prevent the primary cesarean delivery, one of the most effective tools is the continuous presence. One of the most effective tools is the continuous presence of a support person, such as the doula. Next, I will turn the presentation back to Elena, who will implementing step 4 can look like in your facilities.
Now we will see what happens when a step 4 is implemented on a facility. Doulas are transforming the birth well. This was the common practice in Culiacán, Sinaloa, a northern state of Mexico in 2010, and sadly in many more cities in Latin America. Next slide. A huge transformation happened thanks to a doula that brought together a team formed by a compassionate obstetrician and a knowledgeable pediatrician, so that in 2015, just 5 years later, the first non-disturbed, respected water birth took place. I have a short story to tell you about the wonderful OB that appears here. His name is Dr. Humberto Lelevier. A few years ago, I was teaching a doula workshop in the state of Sinaloa. It was the first day of the training, and I proudly presented this slide with the photos that were recently sent to me by the doula, a former student of another training. The lights were out in the room during the presentation, and I started to hear some giggling that got louder and louder coming from the back of the room. So I finally stopped my presentation and asked to the students to please share with me the joke. The reason for their laughter was that Dr. Levalier himself had just entered the room as he was a registered attendee to my workshop. He later shared that he wanted to take the training to immerse himself on the role and work of the doula to better support them when working with them. I had no idea that he was coming because I didn't know until then his name. The next slide, please. I am aware of typical concerns when implementing doula support in hospitals. Yet, all 12 steps of the International Childbirth Initiative relate to step 4. I fully understand the concerns that some facilities may have, so I'll address each one. The doula does not perform any medical procedure. She follows strict guidelines from her scope of practice. We doulas form a team working side by side with the hospital clinical personnel. Our goal is the same: provide the best care and ensure the best birthing experience for the mother and her baby. Regarding the payment for doula care, it varies from facility to facility, from one city to another, and from country to country. In some places, doulas are contracted directly by future parents. In other places, doulas are part of the hospital staff and the facility pays their salaries. And yet there are other places where doulas provide their services as volunteers without any cost to either the facility or the birthing person. Next slide, please. While looking into the implementation of familiar support in hospitals, we ran into several typical concerns. First one, space concern. I'm aware that in many facilities, space is a problem, but we have seen that a person providing support doesn't need a large area to be comfortable. Just having by the side of the laboring woman is sufficient. Privacy issues. A simple curtain made of any available material or any cloth hanging around the bed will take care of the problem. The presence of men. Being respectful of cultural beliefs and traditions is very important. We believe in letting the male partner of the laboring woman decide when and how will he provide support respecting his level of comfort. Antenatal preparation for supportive care for families and or fathers. It is desired and in great importance to offer some kind of antenatal preparation to the labor support person or persons so that the birth runs smoothly. This may be achieved by formal prenatal classes or through any other means of instruction, informal chats, informative presentations, video clips, etc. Again, I welcome back Dr. Christine Morton.
Thank you, Elena. As a part of the global efforts to improve maternal outcomes and increase respectful care in pregnancy and childbirth, there has been a growing global interest in companionship in labor. Some of the studies that I found with a quick look included one from Nepal, an observational study in 6 hospitals that found that women who had companions during labor were better monitored and they had lower use of oxytocin for augmentation of labor, and they had fewer unnecessary cesareans. There's been a few studies out of Iran, some qualitative, some quantitative, that look at who are the best encouraging persons in labor. Although in Iran, mother's care is exclusively provided by the medical staff, and almost all hospitals in the country prohibit the presence of relatives in the maternity ward, mothers felt lonely and would like a companion. And, you know, this seems like information that we should already know and understand. But these kinds of studies can be really important in a policy context where you want to change the policies around companionship in labor. And finally, a study was done in Mexico to explore the integration of traditional midwives in the public health system as doulas. And so this study was, I think, might be very interesting to those of you with traditional midwives, to look at how everybody involved, the clinic staff, the traditional midwives, how they talked about the barriers and the potential promises of such an integration. Once those barriers are identified, then it becomes more possible to find ways to overcome them and implement labor support. Next slide. Now this slide really shows several middle-income countries and where they are on their road to bringing birth companions into maternity care. And as I mentioned before, there's studies in many different countries and cultures exploring how to address companionship in labor. So in this slide, you can see that only 2 of the middle-income countries here are above 40%. 40% of women giving birth are able to bring a companion. The remaining countries are less than 25%. And so there definitely remains a lot of opportunities for improvement and sharing knowledge about this very important step. Next slide. So how can facilities show they are following step 4, both for their internal purposes of accounting and also for a public transparency around step 4? Well, one way is to have a clear policy that states birth companions are welcome to accompany women in labor, and have that posted via signs and posters anywhere pregnant women and their partners or companions may be seen in prenatal clinics, etc. And during the visits, the companion policy should be explained. The final step 4 indicator is that the ICI questionnaires that have been created to distribute to women and companions, those questionnaires should indicate that the facility both encouraged and welcomed women's chosen companions. And this ICI companion questionnaire can be given to the father, a family member, and or the doula. Next slide. Back to you, Elena.
My take-home messages. The universal recommendation is that all women in labor should be accompanied by a companion of her choice. Doulas are the least expensive and most beneficial supportive care practice we can provide for mothers, babies, and their families. Quoting DONA International vision, a doula for every person who wants one. Next slide, please. My gratitude to all pregnant families who share their photos and stories for this presentation. A special recognition to the doulas serving new families worldwide. Thank you to all physicians, midwives, nurses, and medical staff that believe in our work. Together, we make a great team, providing the best care for mothers and babies. And thank you to all of you attending this presentation.
And thank you so much, Elena and Christine, for that fantastic presentation. For those who would like to get more resources, they can go to the DONA International website, which I believe DONA International, the website is dona.org. We also have the references that will be available along with this presentation. And then I'm going to ask you just a couple questions for our audience. I'm going to start with the question that we've been asking to all of our presenters for the webinars, which is to know for a health facility that is reviewing the 12 steps and taking on these challenges for the first time, what would you have to say to them as far as the reason that you would suggest that they tackle step 4 within their facility?
So like at the end of the day, we definitely want to have healthy moms and babies. And health encompasses the physical and the emotional. And, you know, the evidence has been pretty clear that having supportive care from a person who's trained in labor support comfort measures do better, not just physically, but also emotionally. And we want, the goal is to empower women and kind of set them off on their journey in this motherhood on the best possible footing. And merely coming out alive, you know, it should not be the ceiling. You know, we want to provide respectful and empowering care for everyone. And I think the other thing that you might find if you implement this in your facility is that the benefits may radiate out through your unit among your staff if respectful care and language and supportive care becomes the norm for the birthing families at your facility.
Thank you, Christine. I would keep on encouraging facilities to prioritize the step because research has proven that doulas are the most inexpensive but the most effective way to provide optimal care with the best outcomes for mothers and babies during childbirth. Cost effective is the best investment they can make.
Fantastic.
I agree.
That's fantastic. And my next question is, for a health facility that does not currently have access to doulas, what would you recommend to them as the first steps for either finding doulas or training doulas locally?
Okay, I'll start. Now I'll start answering this. Before step 4 is implemented, I suggest all medical staff should be informed what is a doula and what is her scope of practice and what will the doula bring to the facility and to its patients. Christine?
Yes, I agree. And when I would add to that, when you have that information as a change leader or a champion in your facility, it's really important to share that information with the people who might be affected by that. That might include your nursing staff, the administrators. It's important to get wide buy-in so that these kinds of complex implementations can be accepted and ultimately successfully implemented.
And
I would also say you can start small. You know, you can start perhaps with allowing a woman to bring a woman companion with her in labor. And you can do it on a trial basis and see how that goes. Some of the middle income countries that have begun this process and have shared it in the literature suggest that these steps of sharing information, getting buy-in, and starting small, and having a champion, of course, is one of the best ways to get started.
certainly. And if they're interested in providing doula training, would you recommend that they go to the DONA website, or what's the best first way for them to reach out if they're looking for training resources?
Yes, I would definitely recommend that they go to the DONA website because I would recommend that they provide and facilitate a doula training on site. And also encouraging the medical staff to attend it so that they get first-hand information on exactly what is the role of a doula and the benefits of having doulas available for the patients of the facility. Christine, any more ideas?
I think you've captured it all, Elena.
I think so. Well, I want to thank both of you so much for your time and your energy putting together this presentation for us. I think that it should be a very good introduction for those who really want to understand why step 4 is there within the 12 steps and what impact it can have at the facility level and on the families that we're providing care for. And I just want to say a huge thank you to both of you and to DONA International um, for this effort and for the participation with ICI.
Thank you. It was an honor participating in this.
Same here. Thank you. Thank you for all the hard work you do and for all the facilities out there putting these steps into action.
Thank you. All right. And thanks to everyone who's listened into this webinar today. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we hope that you go on to watch the rest of our webinar series.